The great chamber of Concordia Prime stretched wide enough to hold representatives from 47 different species. And today, every seat was filled with delegates who had come to witness judgment being passed on the humans' ambassador. Wei stood at the center of the circular floor, her small delegation arranged behind her in their simple black uniforms that looked almost primitive compared to the shimmering robes and bioluminescent armor worn by the elder races surrounding them. Velshara, High Arbiter, floated above the assembly in his meditation sphere, his translucent body pulsing with colors that the humans had learned to read as emotional states. And right now those colors spoke of disappointment and cold determination. The evidence is clear. The Arbiter's voice echoed through translation devices embedded in every seat. Humanity has violated the Sentinel protocols by establishing 23 unauthorized colonies within the designated quarantine zone. Territories sealed by unanimous decree after the Scourge Wars 2,000 years before your species even discovered fire. Chen Wei raised her hand to speak, but the Arbiter's colors shifted to sharp crimson, and she knew that interruption would only make things worse. The Ketherone representative, an ancient being whose crystalline body held memories spanning 10,000 years, added his voice to the condemnation with a sound like wind through frozen caves. The protocols exist to protect all species from dangers that younger races cannot comprehend. And ignorance is not innocence when lives across the galaxy hang in the balance from the military section. War Master Krell of the Drewonics stood at his full 3-meter height, his forearms crossed in a gesture that every species recognized as judgment. We granted humanity provisional membership 300 years ago with clear conditions and boundaries, yet you spread like a virus into forbidden space without permission or consultation. Chen Wei felt the weight of their stares. Thousands of eyes from dozens of different evolutionary paths, all looking at her people with the same expression: disappointment in unruly children who refused to learn their place. She had prepared for this moment during the 6-month journey to Concordia Prime, rehearsing arguments and appeals, but standing here now, she could feel the decision had already been made before she'd ever arrived. The Arbiter continued, "The colony ships you speak of, launched before first contact with our civilization, do not excuse the violation. For upon joining the Galactic Assembly, you agreed to recall all unauthorized settlements and abide by our territorial regulations. We tried," Chen Wei said quietly, her voice barely carrying through the vast chamber. "We sent recall orders to every colony ship we launched. But you have to understand that our technology was primitive when we sent those ships. They traveled for decades at sublight speeds with crews in cryosleep, and many never received our messages or couldn't change course even if they wanted to." The Arbiter's colors shifted to a patronizing shade of blue. "Then you should have tracked them better, maintained better records, exercised better control over your own expansion. And these failures of planning do not absolve you of responsibility. The murmur of agreement rippled through the assembly chamber, and Chen Wei felt her jaw tighten with frustration that she forced herself to swallow down. "What would you have us do?" she asked. "Those colonies have been established for 50 years or more. Children have been born there who have never seen Earth. Communities have been built, lives have been invested. And you ask us to abandon them to the void?" The Ketherone's voice cut through like ice. "Yes, that is precisely what we demand. For the alternative is to legitimize the violation of our most sacred protocols and invite chaos as every ambitious species decides their expansion. Plans supersede galactic law." Chen Wei looked around the chamber at the faces watching her, some curious, some hostile. "Most simply indifferent to human suffering, then let us negotiate compensation for the colonists. Assistance in relocation, time to properly evacuate, and there will be no negotiation," the Arbiter interrupted, his colors flashing with finality. "The verdict has been determined by the Council of Elders after reviewing all evidence and testimony. Humanity will immediately abandon all 23 unauthorized colonies, submit to technological restrictions preventing further unauthorized expansion, accept permanent observer status without voting rights in this assembly, and comply with inspections to ensure adherence to these terms." The chamber erupted in approval, delegates from the elder races signaling their agreement, while the younger species remained silent, watching to see how the humans would respond to this humiliation. Chen Wei felt something crack inside her chest. Not her heart breaking, but something harder and colder, settling into place where hope used to live. And if we refuse? War Master Krell's mandibles clicked with what might have been amusement.
Oh.
Then we invoke Article 7 of the Galactic Charter. Total economic embargo against human space. Military blockade of all human-controlled systems, and seizure of human assets within assembly territories until compliance is achieved. Your species has no allies here, and no leverage to resist. You will submit, or you will starve in isolation. The silence that followed was absolute. Chen Wei looked at her delegation, saw the anger and hurt in their eyes that mirrored her own feelings, and then looked back at the Arbiter floating in his sphere of privilege. We came to you in peace 3 centuries ago. We followed your laws even when they disadvantaged us. We contributed our resources and labor to assembly projects without complaint. We asked only for fairness and the chance to prove ourselves worthy of full membership. She walked toward the chamber doors, her delegation falling into step behind her. You have made your choice, and now we will make ours. You have 30 days to begin compliance. The Arbiter called after her. Failure to evacuate the unauthorized colonies will result in immediate implementation of Article 7 sanctions. Chen Wei stopped at the great doors that led out of the chamber. Doors that had welcomed humanity with promises of partnership and prosperity 300 years ago. And she turned to face the assembled species one final time. You could have had us as friends and partners. You could have guided us and taught us. You could have welcomed us into this great community of civilizations. But instead, you chose to treat us as subjects to be managed and controlled. Her voice rose to fill the chamber. Whatever comes next. Whatever happens between our species and yours, remember this moment and remember that you chose it. Not us. The human delegation walked through the doors, and they did not look back at the assembly that had rejected them behind them. The chamber remained silent for a long moment before the business of the galaxy continued, as if nothing significant had happened. As if the elder races had not just made the most catastrophic mistake in their long histories, but in that silence. A few of the younger species exchanged glances and wondered what the humans would do now that they had been backed into a corner with nothing left to. Luz the Velshara believed the matter was settled and humanity would comply, as all species eventually did when faced with the overwhelming power of the assembly. The Ketharon, who had lived long enough to see empires rise and fall, felt a small tremor of unease that their vast experience could not quite identify in War Master Krell, whose people had conquered a dozen worlds before joining the assembly. Recognized something in the human ambassador's eyes that he had seen before in the eyes of warriors who had decided that death with honor was preferable to life in chains. The humans had marched out of the assembly, and the galaxy would soon learn what that meant. 3 months had passed since the human delegation walked out of the Galactic Assembly, and the elder races waited for the inevitable capitulation that never came. War Master Krell stood on the command deck of his flagship, the Eternal Judgment, watching displays that showed the blockade positions around the Sol system and the 6 authorized human colony worlds scattered across nearby sectors. 200 Druonics warships, the finest military vessels in the galaxy, enforced the embargo with absolute precision. No ships entered human space and no ships left. Communications from human worlds went unanswered, and the entire human sphere had gone as silent as a tomb. Status report, Krell demanded, his forearms clasped behind his back in a stance that his crew recognized as deep contemplation. The tactical officer, a younger Druonix whose chitons still gleamed with youth, consulted his displays. All blockade positions maintaining formation. No attempted breaches, no distress signals from human worlds, no communication attempts. Nothing at all from human space for 73 days now. Krell's mandibles clicked in thought. What about the surveillance drones we deployed? They confirm minimal activity on human worlds. Some ground traffic in major cities, some agricultural operations continuing, but space traffic has dropped to 0, and even planetary communications seem reduced. It's as if they've simply shut down and are waiting. That assessment troubled Krell more than he wanted to admit, because warriors who were beaten knew they were beaten, and they negotiated. They didn't go silent and wait. Silence meant planning, and planning meant trouble. across the galaxy on the Velshara homeworld. High Arbiter. Shenva's reviewed intelligence reports in his meditation chamber with growing frustration that manifested as sickly yellow patterns across his translucent form before the embargo. Human merchant ships had traveled constantly between their worlds and assembly territories, carrying trade goods and cultural exchanges. Human students had filled spots in galactic universities, eager to learn and integrate. Human art and music had begun appearing in entertainment sectors across a dozen different worlds. Showing a creative and vibrant culture now, there was nothing. Not a single human ship had attempted to breach the blockade. Not one diplomatic overture had been made. Not even a plea for reconsideration or an offer to negotiate terms. The humans had simply vanished from galactic society as if they had never existed. This makes no sense. Shenva spoke to his advisors. Economic pressure works because species need resources they cannot produce themselves. They need markets for their goods. They need the exchange of technology and information. Yet the humans act as if they are completely self-sufficient. A younger Velshara analyst pulsed with nervous green colors. Perhaps they are more self-sufficient than we calculated. Earth alone has diverse biomes and extensive resources. Their colonies were chosen specifically for similar abundance. And humans have shown remarkable adaptability in exploiting various environments. Then we increase the pressure, Genvis decided. Inform War Master Krell to begin seizing human assets outside their controlled space. Freeze their accounts. Confiscate their property. Show them the cost of defiance. The orders went out, but the humans still did not respond. It was a Ketherone archaeological team, working near the edge of the quarantine zone on a research project that had nothing to do with humans, that first noticed the anomaly. Professor Ketherin had lived for 8,000 years and studied the ruins of 100 dead civilizations. So when his instruments detected unusual gravitational distortions near one of the unauthorized human colonies, his curiosity was both professional and personal. Take us closer. He instructed his research vessel's captain. Those readings are inconsistent with normal stellar activity. The ship approached the coordinates where human colonists had built settlements on 3 different moons orbiting a gas giant. Except when they arrived, they found something impossible. The colonies were gone, not destroyed in war, not abandoned with infrastructure left behind, but systematically dismantled and removed. Only foundations remained where buildings once stood. Landing pads showed where ships had rested, but the ships themselves were gone. Even the orbital stations that had served the colonies had been stripped down to their basic frameworks. This is extraordinary. Ketherin examined the data. The humans evacuated 40 million colonists from these moons, and they did it completely. They took everything that could be moved and demolished everything that couldn't. But where did they go, and how did they move so many people without us detecting the ship traffic? His team searched the system thoroughly and found traces. Exhaust signatures from human ships that used chemical propulsion instead of the cleaner fusion drives common in the galaxy. But the signatures scattered in dozens of different directions and faded into the background radiation of space. Ketherin sent his report to the assembly, and it sparked heated debate. If they evacuated the unauthorized colonies, then our demands have been met, some argued, but where are the people? Others countered, 40 million humans don't simply disappear. They must be somewhere, and if they're not on their authorized worlds, then they've moved to other unauthorized locations. The Velshara demanded a full investigation while War Master Krell intensified patrols around the quarantine zone. Convinced that the humans were hiding in the forbidden territories, more reports came in from other unauthorized colony sites, all showing the same pattern of complete evacuation and systematic dismantling. The humans had erased 12 different settlements without anyone noticing the massive logistics required for such operations. They're mocking us, Shenvas fumed. Moving entire populations right under our noses. Hiding in space we cannot search without violating our own protocols. Then the merchant ship Wandering Prophet, operated by the Neutral Zix Consortium, suffered a navigation failure while traveling through what the charts listed as empty space between human territory, the quarantine zone. Captain Zixel, a being whose species had built fortunes on finding opportunities that others missed, cursed in 3 different languages when her FTL drive sputtered and died. forcing an emergency drop into normal space, what her sensors showed when they came back online, made her forget all about the drive malfunction ships. Hundreds of ships, all human design but unlike anything in the galactic databases. Crude angular vessels built for function rather than elegance, covered in armor plating and bristling with what could only be weapons. And they swarmed like insects around three massive structures that were clearly shipyards. Assembly platforms where more vessels were being constructed at a pace that shouldn't be possible. Ezekiel had served as a merchant captain for 60 years, and she knew industrial output when she saw it. These humans were building a war fleet, and they were building it fast, using methods that looked inefficient but clearly worked because new ship hulls were taking shape. Even as she watched get footage, she ordered her crew, "Get everything you can before they notice us." But the humans had already noticed, and a squadron of the angular warships broke formation to intercept, their weapons powering up with energy signatures that made Ezekiel's defensive systems scream warnings. She didn't wait to see if they would fire. She diverted all power to the FTL drive and jumped away even though the calculations weren't complete. Risking a misjump rather than face those weapons, the wandering prophet emerged near a galactic cum relay with its hull scorched from the unstable jump, but its data intact. And Ezekiel sold that data to the highest bidder, which happened to be Belshara Intelligence. When Shenviz watched the footage, his colors went completely white with shock. The assembly convened an emergency session, and the chamber erupted in chaos. As representatives shouted over each other, demanding explanations and solutions. How many ships? Someone asked. At least 300 visible in the footage, an analyst reported. But those shipyards could be producing dozens more every week. And if the humans have one fleet there, they could have others elsewhere. The ships use primitive kinetic weapons, War Master Krell noted. Banned under the sentient warfare accords, unrefined and brutal, but effective against shields if they can get close enough. Where did they get the resources? The Ketherone demanded, building a fleet of that size requires massive industrial capacity. Rare elements, trained workers, none of which should be available to them under the embargo. The answer came slowly as analysts pieced together the puzzle. The humans had evacuated their unauthorized colonies. Yes, but they hadn't moved those people to authorized worlds. They had moved them to hidden colonies scattered throughout the quarantine zone and in deep space between the stars. Colonies that had never been registered, never been detected. Colonies that had been established in secret over decades. How many unauthorized colonies do they actually have? Shenvis asked the question everyone was thinking. We confirmed 23, someone answered. But now we estimate at least 47, and possibly more. The humans have been spreading through space under our watch, and we never noticed because we weren't looking. We assumed they were simple and obedient. The implications settled over the assembly like a shroud. The humans hadn't just ignored the order to evacuate unauthorized colonies. They had used the embargo as cover to consolidate their hidden populations and begin military production. The Galactic Fleet assembled at Rally Point Gamma. A neutral Sector 3 jumps from the nearest human colony, and War Master Krell surveyed the armada with satisfaction that warred with an uneasy feeling he couldn't quite name. 3,000 warships from 12 different species, the largest military force mobilized in 600 years. Cruisers and dreadnoughts and carriers, all bristling with weapons that had kept the galactic peace through overwhelming superiority. And all of it aimed at crushing a single upstart species that had forgotten its place. They will see this force and surrender, the Velshara fleet coordinator predicted, his colors showing absolute confidence. No species can stand against the combined might of the assembly. The humans will recognize their foolishness and beg for terms. Krell's mandibles clicked, but he said nothing about the doubt gnawing at him. Doubt born from watching the humans work in silence for 3 months, building and planning while the elder races assumed victory was inevitable. Fleet jumped into human space in a coordinated strike, emerging simultaneously at the locations of 4 unauthorized colonies and 2 authorized worlds, a demonstration of precision and power that should have made any defender's hearts sink instead. They found empty space. No human warships rose to meet them. No defensive platforms opened fire, no desperate last stands or heroic sacrifices. Just silence and emptiness, where the intelligence report said there should be populations and industry. Scan for hidden vessels, Krell ordered. Suspicion prickling along his sensory organs, they must be here somewhere. Plotting an ambush, the scanners found nothing, but then the first ships began to diet. Started with the Velshara cruiser Enlightened Path, which struck something that sensors insisted wasn't there. The impact tore through its forward hull, and the subsequent decompression killed half the crew, before automated systems sealed the breach. But when damage control teams examined the impact site, they found fragments of what looked like cargo containers filled with explosives mines. Someone shouted across the fleet communications, "They've mined the approach vectors." But these weren't normal mines that pinged on sensors and could be swept by countermeasures. These were debris fields made from components that registered as inert wreckage until ships passed close enough to trigger. Primitive contact detonators. Crude and unsophisticated, but devastatingly effective, because the Galactic fleet had been looking for advanced technology and missed. The simple traps more ships reported. Damage as they encountered more disguised mines. Navigation buoys that suddenly transmitted override codes trying to hack into weapon systems. Cargo pods drifting in formation that turned out to be decoys hiding actual explosives. Even asteroids that had been hollowed out and filled with kinetic kill vehicles. This is not how civilized species wage war. The Velshara coordinator protested as another of his ships took damage. Where are their fleets? Why won't they face us honorably? Krell had the answer, even if he didn't want to speak it aloud, because the humans weren't fighting to win honor. They were fighting to survive. Survivors used every tool available, regardless of honor or tradition. The fleet pressed forward, accepting losses from the traps as the cost of advancing. And finally, they made contact with human vessels. A squadron of those angular warships, spotted near the fourth moon of a gas giant. All ships, Krell commanded. Formation Delta. Close and destroy the enemy before they can retreat. The Galactic fleet moved with practiced precision. 300 vessels converging on the human squadron with overlapping fields of fire. But as the range closed, something felt wrong about the human ships, because they weren't maneuvering. Like manned vessels, should the humans didn't try to evade or form defensive positions. They simply accelerated directly toward the Galactic fleet at maximum thrust. And when the first weapons fire from the assembly, ships struck home, the human vessels exploded with force far beyond what their reactors should have. Produced suicide ships, someone screamed. Across the communication channels, they packed them with explosives. The realization came too late, as 20 human vessels detonated within the Galactic formation, their crude kinetic payloads tearing through shields designed to stop energy weapons. Shrapnel, shredding hull plating and destroying sensor arrays. And in the chaos that followed, the real human ships emerged from hiding. They had been drifting cold in the gas giant's rings. Reactors at minimum power, waiting for the Galactic fleet to commit to the attack on the decoys. And now they struck from unexpected angles with those primitive kinetic weapons that Galactic shields had trouble deflecting. Tungsten slugs accelerated to incredible velocities, punched through shields and armor alike. And the human ships moved with a speed and agility that shouldn't have been possible, darting in to strike and then retreating before the slower Galactic vessels could bring their superior firepower to. Bergrel watched his tactical display light up with damage reports and felt that uneasy feeling transform into certainty. The humans weren't trying to defeat the fleet in open battle because they couldn't, but they also weren't surrendering. They were making the fleet pay for every meter of space it claimed. The Galactic fleet destroyed the human vessels eventually, superior numbers and firepower prevailing as they always did, but the cost was shocking. 42 assembly ships destroyed or crippled in exchange for 23 human vessels. And when damage control teams examined the wrecks, they made a disturbing discovery: the human ships had been remotely controlled, their crews having evacuated via emergency pods before the engagement. The pods themselves equipped with stealth systems that let them slip away while the fleet was distracted by combat. They sacrificed ships, but saved crews. A Ketherone analyst noted, exchanging material for lives, buying time and bleeding us without losing trained personnel. The pattern repeated across every engagement over the following weeks. The humans refused to defend fixed positions or fight where the galactic fleet wanted them to fight. Instead, they hit supply convoys traveling between assembly space and the staging areas, destroyed logistics bases that supported the fleet's operations, and ambushed isolated patrol groups that strayed too far from the main formations were a master. Krell found himself fighting a war against an enemy that was everywhere and nowhere, his fleet spending more time protecting its own supply lines than advancing on human positions. And the costs mounted not in dramatic battles, but in steady attrition that ground down ships and morale alike then. The reports came in about attacks on assembly territories far from human space, raids on orbital refineries and manufacturing stations, hit-and-run strikes that destroyed infrastructure and vanished before defenders could respond. How are they moving ships past our patrols? The Velshara coordinator demanded. We have sensors watching every route between human space and our territories. They cannot possibly be evading our detection networks. The answer came from a Ketherone scientist, who had been studying the wreckage of destroyed human vessels, and found something that made his ancient heart race, with a fear he hadn't felt in millennia there. Using Scourge technology, he reported to the assembly. These engines are based on principles we found in quarantine zone artifacts and sealed away as too dangerous. The humans must have excavated ruins in the forbidden territories and reverse-engineered propulsion systems that make their ships faster than anything we have. The revelation sent shockwaves through the assembly because the Scourge had nearly destroyed galactic civilization 2,000 years ago. Their technology was powerful, but unstable, prone to catastrophic failures and worse effects that had wiped out entire systems before the threat was finally contained. If the humans are using Scourge technology, they're playing with forces they don't understand, Shenvez declared. We must stop them before they unleash something that cannot be controlled. But the Ketherone representatives, who actually remembered the Scourge Wars rather than just reading about them in archives, saw different implications. If the humans can use Scourge technology safely, what else might they have found in the quarantine zone? What if they discover weapons that we sealed away? What if they wake something that we barely managed to defeat the first time? The question spawned fear that spread through the elder races faster than the human raids spread through assembly space. Velshara demanded total human surrender and the immediate cessation of all Scourge-related research. The Duranics began calculating whether their military could actually defeat an enemy that could strike anywhere with impunity. And the Ketherone quietly started recalling their ships from the fleet, because they had seen this pattern before. A younger race pushed too hard, given access to power they shouldn't have, becoming a threat that costs more to fight than to negotiate with. Meanwhile, the younger species in the assembly watched these developments with intense interest and began asking dangerous questions among themselves. If the humans could defy the elder races and survive, what did that mean for the balance of power that had kept them as junior partners for centuries? Some of them started secret communications with human representatives, feeling out the possibility of alliances or at least neutral positions, because they recognized that the galaxy was changing and sitting on the fence might be safer than backing the losing side. The transmission arrived simultaneously at communication hubs on 50 different worlds, bypassing security protocols and military encryption as if they didn't exist. And within hours, the contents had spread across the galaxy like wildfire through dry grass. Ambassador Chen Wei appeared in the recordings, standing in what looked like an observation deck with stars visible through windows behind her. And her expression was calm, but her eyes held the weight of someone who had made terrible choices for necessary reasons. People of the galaxy, she began. For 300 years, humanity has been part of the Galactic Assembly, and for 300 years we believed in the promise of that institution. We trusted that the elder races would guide us fairly, that their wisdom came from benevolence rather than self-interest. We were wrong. The first files began downloading to every device that accessed the transmission. Gigabytes of data that had been carefully organized and documented. And what they contained was evidence that the elder races had worked very hard to keep secret. These are recordings from assembly sessions closed to junior members. Wei continued. Sessions where the Velshara, Ketherone, and Duranics explicitly discussed maintaining the current power structure by preventing younger species from advancing too quickly. Recordings showed High Arbiter Shenvez from 50 years ago, his colors displaying satisfaction as he explained to other elder race leaders. We must ensure that species like the humans remain dependent on assembly infrastructure and guidance. Technological parity would undermine the hierarchical stability that has maintained peace for millennia. Another recording showed Ketharon, council members debating how to respond to human requests for access to advanced manufacturing techniques. If we give them the tools to build their own infrastructure, they will no longer need our expertise or our trade networks. Better to provide them with finished products and maintain their reliance on our industries. War Master Krell himself appeared in military strategy sessions discussing the quarantine zone. The sealed territories contain technologies that could shift the balance of power. We have quietly harvested these resources for our own use, while preventing other species from accessing them. This advantage must be maintained. The galaxy watched these recordings with growing outrage, particularly the younger species who had spent centuries wondering why their advancement always seemed to stall just before achieving true independence. From elder race systems, but Chenwei wasn't finished, and the next set of files was even more damaging. The Sentinel protocols, she said. These regulations that we supposedly violated were not created to protect the galaxy from ancient dangers, or at least not primarily for that purpose. They were created to maintain elder race control over the most resource-rich and technologically significant regions of space. Maps appeared showing the quarantine zone, boundaries overlaid with resource surveys that had never been shared with the full assembly, surveys showing massive deposits of rare elements essential for advanced manufacturing, ancient ruins containing technologies far beyond current galactic standards, inhabitable worlds that could support billions of colonists. The Scourge Wars were real, Chenwei acknowledged. The dangers in the quarantine zone are real, but the elder races have been selectively harvesting technology from those zones for 2,000 years, while telling the rest of us that it's all too dangerous to touch. They kept the benefits and made us bear the costs of restriction. Documents detailed expeditions by Ketharon archaeologists into sealed zones, recovery of artifacts that were then reverse-engineered and incorporated into elder race technology without any of the catastrophic failures they warned would happen if younger species tried the same thing. The evidence kept coming. Financial records showing how elder race corporations profited from selling technology to younger species at inflated prices while suppressing any attempts by those species to develop equivalent capabilities themselves. Correspondence between Velshara officials discussing how to manipulate trade agreements to maintain dependency relationships. Military assessments that coldly calculated how many ships each younger species could build before being considered a threat. We trusted you, Chenwei said, and for the first time emotion cracked through her controlled demeanor. We believed in the dream of a galactic community where all species worked together for the common good. We accepted our junior status because we thought it was temporary, that we would earn our place through cooperation and contribution. She paused, gathering herself. But you never intended to let us rise to equal status. You created a system designed to keep us beneath you forever, extracting our resources and labor while limiting our growth. And when we tried to expand naturally, as all living species do, you called it a violation and threatened us with destruction. The younger species, representatives who received these transmissions, felt the shock of confirmation for suspicions many had harbored but never dared voice, while the elder races scrambled to contain the damage and discredit the evidence. High Arbiter Shenviz issued immediate denials, his colors flashing with indignation. These documents are fabrications, human lies designed to sow discord and justify their illegal actions. The protocols exist for the protection of all species, and any suggestion otherwise is conspiracy theory. But the humans had anticipated these denials and released authentication codes that proved the documents came from assembly archives, along with testimony from lower-ranking officials and elder race governments who confirmed the contents and provided additional evidence. The Ketharon tried a different approach, acknowledging that mistakes had been made but framing them as unfortunate misunderstandings rather than systematic exploitation. We sought to prevent younger species from repeating our own errors. Perhaps we were overly cautious, but our intentions were protective rather than malicious. War Master Krell, to his credit, said nothing at all because he recognized that the battle for public opinion was already lost, and anything he said would only make things worse. The younger species in the assembly began holding emergency sessions of their own, debating how to respond to these revelations, and the consensus that emerged was anger. Deep anger at being manipulated for centuries by the very institutions that claimed to represent their interests, the Zix Consortium, whose merchant fleets moved goods across the galaxy, announced they would no longer honor the embargo against human space. We are traitors, not enforcers of elder race political games. And if the humans want to buy or sell goods, we will treat them like any other customer. 3 other species withdrew their ships from the galactic fleet, citing concerns that the military action was based on false pretenses and served elder race interests rather than galactic security. Velshara tried to maintain order by calling for a full assembly session to address the accusations. But when the session convened, half the species refused to attend, sending messages that they would not participate in institutions they no longer trusted. The political fractures that had been forming since the war began split wide open, and the elder races found themselves trying to maintain control of a coalition that was falling apart around them. Then the humans made their formal offer, transmitted directly to every government and broadcast on every public channel so that no one could claim ignorance of the terms. Ambassador Chen Wei appeared again, this time with the full human diplomatic corps standing behind her in a show of unity and strength. We are offering the galaxy a choice, and this offer is non-negotiable because we are no longer asking for permission or approval. She outlined the proposal with clinical precision. The elder races will surrender their monopoly on advanced technology and grant full equality to all species within the assembly. Complete voting rights, unrestricted access to technological databases, removal of artificial barriers to development, and opening of the quarantine zone territories under proper safety protocols, administered by representatives from all species. The alternative was spelled out just as clearly. If the elder races refuse, humanity will release every piece of technology we've recovered from the quarantine zone to any species that wants it. We will share our shipbuilding techniques, our weapons designs, our propulsion systems based on Scourge technology, and yes, we will share the locations of ruins that contain even more advanced artifacts. The threat was obvious. The elder races could maintain some control by agreeing to reforms, or they could watch as the entire galaxy gained access to technologies that would make the current power structure obsolete. You called us reckless for exploring the quarantine zone, Chen Wei said. You claimed we were endangering the galaxy by accessing forbidden knowledge. But the truth is that you were afraid we would find what you've been hoarding and learn that your superiority was built on lies. Rather than wisdom, she leaned forward, staring directly into the camera. So here's our offer: share the power, or watch us give it away to everyone. Create a true partnership of equals, or see your carefully maintained hierarchy collapse into chaos as every species gains the tools to challenge you. You have 1 week to decide. The transmission ended, and the galaxy erupted into frantic activity as governments debated. Populations protested, and the elder races faced a choice they had never wanted to make. The week passed with the galaxy holding its breath. And on the 8th day, Ambassador Chen Wei returned to Concordia Prime, walking through the same doors she had walked out of 6 months earlier. But this time she did not come to beg for fairness or plead for understanding. This time she came with power. And everyone in the chamber knew if the assembly had convened in full session. All 47 member species represented. But the atmosphere was completely different from the last time humanity stood in judgment. Then the elder races had radiated confidence and authority. Now they sat in wary silence while the younger species watched with barely concealed anticipation. High Arbiter Shenvas floated in his meditation sphere, his colors muted and shifting through patterns that suggested deep internal conflict. Ambassador Chen Wei, humanity has been granted the floor to present its proposal formally. Though I must note that the manner of this presentation, with ultimatums and threats, is not how the assembly traditionally conducts diplomatic business. Chen Wei smiled without warmth. the Assembly's traditional methods of conducting business involved maintaining unjust hierarchies and exploiting junior members. So perhaps it's time for new traditions, eh? Murmur ran through the chamber, but no one directly challenged her statement because the evidence she had released made denial impossible. The choice we offered is simple. Chen Wei continued. The galaxy can continue under the current system, we're elder races, maintain control through information, asymmetry, and technological monopoly. Or we can build something better. Something actually fair? She activated a display that showed a proposed new charter for Galactic governance, full voting rights for all member species regardless of age or technological level, complete transparency in all assembly operations, unrestricted access to technological databases with safety training provided to all species, joint administration of the quarantine zone with research teams including representatives from every species, and most importantly, the end of artificial barriers designed to keep younger species dependent. The Velshara delegation pulsed with agitated colors and their spokesman spoke. This proposal would fundamentally alter the structure that has maintained galactic stability for over 3,000 years. The hierarchy exists because some species have proven wisdom through experience, while others are still learning. Granting equal authority to inexperienced voices risks chaos and poor decisions. You mean it risks decisions you don't control, Chen Wei corrected. And as for stability, your system was stable the way a prison is stable. Everyone stayed in their place because they had no choice, but that's not peace. That's just successful oppression, a representative from the anther species. One of the younger civilizations that had joined the assembly only 200 years ago stood to speak. The elder races gave us technology we could not have developed on our own. They provided guidance that helped us avoid catastrophic mistakes. Surely that counts for something and deserves respect. Chen Wei nodded. It counts for a great deal. And we're not saying the elder races have nothing to offer. Their experience and knowledge are valuable. What we're saying is that value should not translate into permanent authority over others. A teacher's role is to help students learn, not to keep them as students forever. War Master Krell rose from his seat. His forearms spread in a gesture of concession. Humanity has proven its capability through this conflict. You outmaneuvered our intelligence services, defeated our blockade, and fought our fleet to a standstill using inferior technology and superior tactics. The Dranics respect strength, and you have shown strength. We will support this new charter. The statement sent shock through the Velshara delegation because the Dranics had been their strongest military allies. But Krell continued, we fight when fighting serves our interests. We negotiate when negotiation serves our interests. Continuing this war serves no one's interests except perhaps humanity's, because every day we fight as another day they demonstrate that the elder races are not as superior as we claimed. The logic was brutal, but undeniable, and other species began to see the calculation, opposing humanity. Now it only proved that the old system was maintained through force rather than legitimate authority, the Ketherone representative. Ancient Professor Catharin, who had discovered the evacuated human colonies, spoke in tones that resonated with deep time. I have lived 8,000 years and studied 100 dead civilizations, and I have learned that species who cling to power past its natural time become fossils. Interesting to study, but irrelevant to the living. The humans are offering us a choice between evolution and extinction. And I choose evolution. The Ketherone will support the new charter, he declared. And we will work with all species to safely explore and understand the technologies in the quarantine zone. Because knowledge hoarded is knowledge wasted. And the galaxy needs all the wisdom it can gather if we are to face the challenges ahead. The younger species erupted in approval. Some standing to signal their agreement, others transmitting their support through their delegation channels. And the momentum became unstoppable as species after species declared for the new system. The Velshara found themselves isolated, their protests about tradition and stability falling on ears that had heard too. Many lies hidden in those words, Shanova's colors shifted through rapid patterns that suggested something like despair. If we agree to this charter, what guarantee do we have that humanity will not simply become the new oppressor? using their military strength and technological discoveries to dominate others, as they claim we did? Chen Wei had been waiting for this question. You have the same guarantee we had when we joined the assembly. None. Except that systems designed with transparency and accountability make oppression harder to maintain. We're not asking you to trust our benevolence. We're proposing structures that limit everyone's ability to abuse power, including our own. She walked to the center of the chamber. Turning to address all the assembled species, some of you are worried about human intentions. Some fear that opening access to advanced technology will cause instability. Some simply don't like change, and those are all reasonable concerns. But here's what you need to understand. This is happening whether you agree or not if you vote for the new charter. We build it together with input from all species, with safeguards and protocols that reflect everyone's concerns. We proceed carefully and cooperatively if you vote against it. Humanity will release all our quarantine zone discoveries to anyone who wants them. We'll share our shipbuilding techniques with every species that asks. We'll help younger civilizations develop their own independent infrastructure. And the result will be chaos, as dozens of species rush to exploit new technologies without coordination or safety measures. The choice was clear: controlled change or uncontrolled chaos. And even the Velshara could see which options served the galaxy better. The vote took 3 hours as delegations consulted with their home governments and debated among themselves. But when the final tally was recorded, the result was overwhelming. 38 species in favor of the new charter, 6 opposed, 3 abstaining. The old Galactic Assembly was dissolved by its own vote. And in its place, the Galactic Concord was born with a charter that promised genuine equality and shared governance. High Arbiter Shenviz, who would not hold that title under the new system, floated in his sphere with colors that spoke of resignation and perhaps a small hint of relief. The transition will take time. Institutions do not change overnight, but the Assembly, or rather, the Concord, will honor this vote. He looked directly at Chen Wei. I hope you understand the responsibility you have taken on. For 3,000 years, we maintained stability through careful control. Now you have unleashed forces that may prove impossible to manage if chaos results from this change. History will judge you harshly. Chen Wei met his gaze without flinching. And if freedom results from this change, if species develop and thrive without artificial limits, if the galaxy becomes genuinely collaborative rather than hierarchical, then history will judge us kindly either way. We're willing to accept that responsibility because we believe people deserve the chance to govern themselves. The session adjourned, and species representatives scattered to begin the complex work of building new institutions. But before leaving, Chen Wei stood at the observation windows of Concordia Prime and watched the stars. Thinking about the journey that had brought humanity to this moment, a voice spoke behind her. Your people fought well. I underestimated you, and that mistake cost many lives. She turned to find War Master Krell standing there, his massive frame somehow less threatening than it had been months ago. War always costs lives. The question is whether those costs purchase anything worth having, and have they? Krell asked, was this worth the ships you lost, the people who died, the resources you spent? Chen Wei considered the question seriously. Ask me in 100 years when we can see what kind of galaxy we've built. But I think yes, because my children and their children will live in a galaxy where humanity is respected rather than merely tolerated, where our potential is limited only by our abilities rather than by arbitrary restrictions. That's worth fighting for.